She was worth $3 billion, owned a media empire, and had never once asked anyone for anything. Until the night she showed up at his door. Nathan Reed was nobody. A single father, a mid-level creative director, a man who packed his daughter's lunch every morning and fell asleep on the couch most nights. He was the last person Ariana Sterling should have wanted. And yet there she stood. No driver, no bodyguard, no armor. Just a woman who had finally run out of places to hide. What happened next would cost them both everything they had built. This is a work of cinematic fiction created entirely for entertainment. All characters, companies, and events are completely fictional. If this story has already reached your city, hit the like button and drop your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The snow had stopped falling around 9 o'clock, leaving Denver's western edges buried under a thick, undisturbed quiet. Out here, past the suburbs where the streetlights grew sparse, and the houses sat far enough apart that you couldn't hear your neighbors argue, the night had a particular kind of stillness that Nathan Reed had come to depend on. He needed the quiet. He had earned it in the way that people earn things they never wanted to earn, through loss, through sleepless years, through the slow and grinding work of becoming both parents at once. It was 20 minutes past 11 when he finally sat down. The dishes were done. The homework folder was signed and tucked back into Emma's backpack, which was sitting by the front door because Emma would absolutely forget it in the morning if it wasn't right there, in front of the door, impossible to walk past without tripping over. Her lunch was made, peanut butter, apple slices, the little note he still wrote, even though she was 8 now and had started telling him it was embarrassing. He wrote them anyway. He figured he had maybe 2 more years before she'd make him stop completely. Nathan sat on the couch with his laptop open and a glass of water going warm on the coffee table beside him. He had a campaign deck due Tuesday that he wasn't close to finishing, and the ideas that had seemed promising on Friday afternoon looked flat and unconvincing now. He scrolled back through his own notes with the particular exhaustion of a man who has been creative on demand all day and has nothing left. He was thinking about closing the laptop and just going to bed when the knock came. It was sharp, deliberate, not the loose, uncertain knock of someone who wasn't sure they had the right house. This was the knock of someone who knew exactly where they were and had knocked anyway despite everything inside them that must have been screaming to turn around and leave. Nathan looked up from the screen. He checked the time in the corner of his laptop. 11:23. Nobody knocked at 11:23 on a Saturday unless something was wrong. His first thought was his neighbor Gerald, who was 71 and lived alone and had knocked late once before when his furnace quit in January. Nathan was already moving toward the door, already mentally running through whether he had jumper cables, whether it was a car thing or a medical thing, whether he should grab his phone first. He pulled the door open. The woman standing on his porch was not Gerald. Ariana Sterling stood in the cold with her arms wrapped around herself, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly mortgage payment. Her dark hair was down, which he had never seen before. At work, she kept it pulled back in a way that made her look like she was always about to walk into a boardroom and dismantle someone. Tonight, it fell around her face in a way that made her look younger and somehow less certain of herself. Her mascara had smudged slightly beneath one eye. Her heels, she was wearing heels, in the snow, on his uneven front path, had tracked through the slush, and she didn't seem to have noticed. She was, without question, the most powerful person Nathan Reed had ever met in real life. She looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. "Hi," she said. Nathan stared at her for a moment. He was aware that he was wearing a faded Colorado Rockies t-shirt and sweatpants with a small bleach stain near the left knee that he'd never gotten around to throwing away. He was aware that his house, visible behind him, was a 3-bedroom rental with a second-hand couch and a pile of Emma's art supplies spread across the kitchen table and a small soccer cleat sitting in the middle of the hallway for no reason he could currently explain. He was aware, in a distant and slightly unreal way, that Ariana Sterling was standing on his porch at 11:23 on a Saturday night. "Ms. Sterling," he said. "Nathan." Her voice was controlled, but only just. There was something underneath it, something thin and frayed, like a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long. "I know it's late. I know this is—" She stopped, looked past him into the warmth of the house for just a second, then back at his face. "I don't know why I'm here." "Okay," he said. That's not true. She pressed her lips together. I do know why I'm here. I just don't know how to say it without it being... She exhaled, and the breath clouded in the cold air between them. Strange. You're standing on my porch at 11:30 in November, Nathan said. Strange is already handled. Something flickered across her face. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one, there and gone. He stepped back from the door. Come inside, he said, before you lose a foot to frostbite. He made coffee because it was the only thing he could think to do with his hands. Ariana sat at his kitchen table, and he was acutely aware of how the kitchen looked through a visitor's eyes. The crayon drawing Emma had made last week that was held to the fridge, with a magnet shaped like a cactus, the slightly crooked cabinet door that he kept meaning to fix, the stack of permission slips and school newsletters and birthday party invitations that had colonized the corner of the counter and were slowly expanding their territory. Ariana's kitchen, if what people said was accurate, probably had a full-time chef and surfaces that had never once been touched by a permission slip. She didn't look at the kitchen like she was judging it. She looked at it like she was seeing it clearly for the first time, which was almost worse. She asleep? Ariana asked, nodding toward the hallway. Since 9. Emma goes out like a light when it gets cold. He set a mug in front of her. She sleeps harder in winter. I have no explanation for that. That's sweet. It's extremely convenient. He sat down across from her and wrapped both hands around his own mug. You want to tell me what happened? Ariana looked at the coffee. She turned the mug slightly, aligning the handle to some angle that seemed to matter to her. Then she looked up. I had dinner tonight, she said. My mother set it up. She means well. She genuinely means well. But she's been worried about me for a while. The whole, you're 30 years old, you work too much, when are you going to meet someone conversation? So she arranged this dinner at Elway's. The man was, she paused, presentable. He was a venture capitalist, very successful, very confident. He had nice teeth. High bar, Nathan said. His first question, after we ordered drinks, was whether I actually ran the company or whether I had a team of people who made the real decisions for me. Nathan looked at her. I'm sorry? He asked it like he was being thoughtful, like he was giving me a chance to explain myself. Her voice was even, but her jaw was tight, and I sat there across from this man with his nice teeth, and I thought, I have been running this company since I was 24. I have made decisions that moved markets. I have been in rooms where men twice his age looked at me like I didn't belong, and I won anyway. And I built something real, and this man is sitting here in the restaurant my assistant booked asking me to justify whether I'm actually in charge. She picked up the coffee and drank some of it without seeming to taste it. What did you say to him? Nathan asked. I said yes, I run the company, and then I spent the next 20 minutes trying to be charming because my mother had worked so hard to set this up, and I didn't want to be the reason it fell apart. She set the mug down. He spent that same 20 minutes explaining his portfolio to me, unsolicited, in detail. A pause. He got the valuation on one of his own companies wrong by about $40 million. Did you tell him? No? She laughed, a short, dry sound that didn't have much humor in it. I sat there and I smiled and I ate my steak, and at some point he said something about how it was impressive that I'd done all this without ever getting married. And the way he said impressive, like he was complimenting a dog that had learned to open a door. Nathan didn't say anything. I got in my car, Ariana said, and I drove. I wasn't going anywhere specifically. She looked down at the table. I couldn't go back to the penthouse. I couldn't sit in that apartment by myself tonight and be fine with it. She turned the mug again. I ended up here. How long were you parked outside before you knocked? She didn't answer immediately. 20 minutes, she said finally. 20 minutes, he repeated. I kept thinking you'd be asleep, or you'd think I'd lost my mind, or both. She met his eyes. Have you? Decided you've lost your mind? Yes. Nathan considered this. I think, he said, that you had a very bad night, and you didn't want to be alone, and you drove somewhere you felt safe, and it happened to be here. He shrugged. That's not losing your mind. That's just being a person. Ariana looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't entirely read. "You make it sound very simple," she said. "It is simple." "Nathan." She said his name like she was being careful with it. "I'm your employer. I own the company where you work. I showed up at your house in the middle of the night because—" She stopped. "Because what?" She looked out the small window above the kitchen sink, at the dark yard and the frozen hedge and the faint orange glow of the streetlight down the road. When she looked back at him, something in her face had shifted. The careful composure she carried like a second skin had slipped, just slightly, and underneath it she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Because you're the only person I've met in years," she said, "who talks to me like I'm just a person." The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere in the house, the furnace clicked on and then settled into its low, steady hum. Nathan looked at the woman across his kitchen table, the woman who, in the context of his professional life, existed on an entirely different plane of reality, and felt something shift in his own chest that he didn't have a clean name for. He had felt it before. In meetings, in the brief and scattered moments when their professional paths actually crossed. He had felt it and immediately put it away, the way you put something away in a drawer and push the drawer firmly shut and don't go looking for it. He hadn't gone looking for it. He still hadn't, but it was sitting right there. They talked until 2 in the morning. That was the part Nathan didn't fully anticipate. Not that she came, not even that she stayed, but that talking to Ariana Sterling in his kitchen at midnight was the easiest conversation he'd had in years. There was no performance in it. No one was trying to impress anyone. She had already shown up without armor, and he was sitting there in his bleach-stained sweatpants, and somehow that stripped the whole thing down to something genuine. She asked about Emma first, not in the polite, glancing way people sometimes asked. The cursory, "How old is she? Oh, that's a fun age," but in the way of someone who actually wanted to know. What was she like? What was she interested in? Was she funny? "She's ruthless," Nathan said, and meant it as the highest possible compliment. "She has this look she gives me when she thinks I'm being an idiot. Very patient, very steady. Like she's giving me time to figure it out myself before she has to explain it to me. She's 8. I have no idea where she got it." Ariana laughed. A real one this time, loose and unguarded, and the sound of it changed the whole room. "She sounds amazing." "She is," he said it simply without hedging. "She's the best thing I've ever done. I'm aware that sounds like a thing people say, but I actually mean it. On my worst days, and there have been some really bad days, Emma is the reason the math still works. Like the whole equation would fall apart without her in it." Ariana was quiet for a moment. "How long?" she asked. "Since 4 years." He didn't need her to finish. Emma was 4 when her mother died, so she doesn't— He stopped, recalibrated. "She has some memories. A few. Mostly feelings more than images, I think. She talks about her sometimes. We have pictures up." He glanced toward the hallway. "She has her mom's eyes and her mom's stubborn streak, and some days that's the hardest thing, and some days it's the only thing getting me through." Ariana didn't say she was sorry. He appreciated that. Most people said they were sorry and then looked relieved when the conversation moved on. Ariana just stayed with it for a moment, let it sit in the room without trying to clear it away. "I don't know how you do it," she said. "Alone. You don't, at first. At first you're just surviving the week, then the month. Then at some point you look up, and it's been 2 years, and you're still standing, and that becomes the evidence you use to convince yourself you can keep going." He shrugged. "It's not graceful. Some mornings I'm still just surviving the morning. But you do it. Somebody has to." He looked at his coffee. "She needs somebody. I know this sounds small, but that is genuinely the thing that got me through the first year. She needs somebody who's going to be here. So I'm here. Every day, I'm here." He paused. "It sounds very noble when I say it like that. In reality, it means I've watched the first 30 minutes of about 40 different movies in the past 4 years because I fall asleep before the plot gets going." Ariana smiled. "What's your record?" 11 minutes. I genuinely do not remember selecting the movie. Woke up to the credits." She was laughing again, and he was laughing with her, and it struck him, somewhere in the middle of that, how strange it was that this was happening, that she was here, that this was the realest conversation he'd had in longer than he could pinpoint, and it was with the woman who owned the company where he worked, in his kitchen, at 10 minutes to 1 in the morning. He thought about that for a second and then stopped thinking about it because it didn't help. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes?" "The man tonight, from dinner, if he'd been," he thought about how to phrase it, "different, respectful. If he'd actually been interested in you, the actual you and not the idea of you, would you have wanted that? Would you have wanted it to work?" Ariana considered the question seriously, which he appreciated. "I don't know," she said. "I think I would have wanted to want it. I think I've spent a long time trying to want the things I'm supposed to want." She looked at him. "But wanting to want something and actually wanting it are very different. What do you actually want?" She was quiet for a moment. "Someone who sees me when I'm not performing," she said. "I spend so much time performing. Every room I walk into, I'm Ariana Sterling, the CEO, the billionaire, the one who's supposed to have every answer. And I'm good at it. I'm very good at it. But I'm tired." She said the last word like she'd been holding it for a long time. "I am genuinely tired of being impressive. I'd like to just be tired in front of someone who isn't going to use it against me." Nathan looked at her across the table. He thought about the drawer, the firmly shut drawer. "You're tired in front of me right now," he said. "I know." She held his gaze. "That's why I'm still here." The problem, Nathan thought later, not then, not in the warm kitchen with the coffee going cold, but later, in the dark, lying awake after Ariana had gone, was that he had known something was there long before tonight. He'd have told you he didn't know. If someone had asked him 2 weeks ago whether he had feelings for his boss, his employer, the woman who owned the company where he worked, one of the most powerful and recognizable figures in Denver's business world, he would have said no. Immediately and without hesitation. Because the answer that made sense, the answer that kept his life manageable and his career intact and his daughter's future protected, was no. But there is a difference between the answer you give and the thing you actually know. He had watched her in meetings, not the way certain male colleagues watched her, with that calculating assessment she navigated with the ease of long practice, but with something that felt to him more like attention. She was sharp in ways that most people in those rooms weren't, and she knew when to be quiet and when to cut through the noise, and she never performed certainty she didn't have. When she didn't know something, she said so. That was rarer than it should have been at her level. He had caught her looking at him sometimes, not in any way that crossed a line. A glance held a second longer than necessary during a presentation, something that might have been amusement in her expression when he made a point that contradicted the direction the room was moving in. Small things, the kinds of things that are easy to dismiss and difficult to forget. He had dismissed them. He lay in the dark now and listened to the house settle and thought about the way she had looked when he opened the door. Not Ariana Sterling, the billionaire. Just a woman in the cold, tired all the way down to something she couldn't fix with work or willpower. He thought about the question he hadn't asked her. He thought about the drawer still shut, and whether he was the kind of man who left things in drawers or whether tonight had changed something about the answer to that. He didn't figure it out. He lay there until almost 4 in the morning and then fell asleep. And in the morning, Emma was shaking his shoulder and asking if there was syrup for the waffles, and he was back to being dad, which was the only version of himself he completely knew how to be. But he couldn't unknow what he knew. That was the problem. Sunday morning moved at its usual pace. Syrup, waffles, cartoons. Emma's explanation of a conflict she'd had with her best friend that seemed to involve a misunderstanding about whose turn it was to pick the game at recess. Nathan listened with full attention, asked clarifying questions, offered what he hoped was useful guidance, and packed it away in the back of his mind to think about later because Emma's social world operated by rules he was still learning. By noon, he had done 2 loads of laundry, fixed the crooked cabinet door that had been bothering him for 3 weeks, and returned 6 emails that were technically overdue. By 2 o'clock, he and Emma were at the park down the road, Emma testing the limits of how high she could swing without Nathan asking her to come down, Nathan sitting on the bench with his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on his daughter. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out expecting something from work. A notification, maybe. A forward from one of his team members who apparently did not observe weekends. It was a text from a number he hadn't saved but recognized after a moment. He'd gotten a work message from this number once, months ago, a logistical thing. "I'm sorry about last night. That was an overstep, and I shouldn't have put you in that position." He stared at the text. Emma sailed past him on the swing, her sneakers pointing at the sky, her hair streaming back from her face. "Dad, look!" "I see you," he said automatically. He typed back, "You don't have to apologize." The response came faster than he expected, like she'd been holding her phone. "I showed up at your house at midnight. I definitely have to apologize." He thought about this. He typed, "You were having a bad night and you went somewhere safe. That's not something to apologize for." A long pause. Then, "Was it safe?" He looked at Emma on the swing. He looked at the frozen park, the bare trees, the pale winter sky. He looked at the text on his screen. He typed, "Yeah, it was." Another pause, longer. "Okay," she sent back, "just that." "Okay." He sat with his phone in his hand for a moment and then put it in his pocket and looked at his daughter. "Dad, are you even watching?" Emma demanded, sailing past again. "I'm watching," he said. "You looked at your phone." "I was watching between looking at my phone." She made a sound that was deeply unimpressed. He hid a smile. He pulled his hands back into his pockets and watched Emma swing and thought about a text message and a woman in the cold and a drawer that was no longer as firmly shut as he'd believed. Monday arrived with the particular cruelty of Mondays that follow complicated weekends. Nathan dropped Emma at school, drove to the office, got coffee from the machine in the third-floor kitchen that produced something technically identifiable as coffee, and settled into his desk with the campaign deck that had been sitting half-finished since Friday. His team was good. He had a good team. 4 creative directors, 2 copywriters, a data analyst who communicated primarily in charts, and was right about things with unnerving consistency. He liked his work. He had gotten here by being good at it, by the slow and unglamorous process of being right more often than he was wrong, by building relationships with people who wanted to work with him again. He had not gotten here because of anyone's feelings about him. That was something he knew precisely and had never had to defend. He was 45 minutes into a draft revision when Marcus Chen dropped into the chair on the other side of his desk. Marcus was his closest thing to a work friend. 5 years at the company, good at his job, excellent at reading a room, and occasionally a source of information that circulated through the office before it showed up in any official communication. He sat in Nathan's guest chair with the particular casualness of someone who had stopped by without an agenda, which Nathan had learned meant he had a very specific agenda. "Hey," Marcus said. "Hey," Nathan said, without looking up from his screen. "Good weekend?" "Fine." "Quiet?" Nathan looked up. Marcus was doing the thing where his face was perfectly neutral, which was the face he made when he was trying very hard not to seem like he was doing the thing he was doing. "What?" Nathan said. "Nothing." Marcus glanced at the doorway. "Just, how was your weekend? Normal question." "Marcus." "There's a thing going around," Marcus said it quickly, like removing a bandage. "I don't know where it started. I'm not the one who started it, but there's a thing going around." Nathan set down his pen. "What kind of thing?" Marcus exhaled. "The Saturday night kind of thing." The coffee on Nathan's desk felt very far away suddenly. He kept his voice steady. "Explain." "Someone saw a car." Marcus spread his hands in a gesture that tried to convey helplessness and concern simultaneously. "Parked outside your place Saturday night. For a while, apparently. And then, I don't know. It's a small office, man. People talk." "Someone saw a car," Nathan repeated. "That's the whole thing?" "That's the seed of the thing. The thing has grown from there because that's what things do." Marcus dropped his voice. "Nobody's named names out loud, but the car is very recognizable. She has a... I know what car she drives." "Right," Marcus nodded. "So," Nathan sat back in his chair. "How wide?" he asked. "Wide enough that I heard it before I got my coffee this morning." Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm telling you because I'd want to know. If it were me." "I know." Nathan looked at his screen, then back at Marcus. "It's not what people are making it." I believe you. Nothing. He stopped. It was just a conversation. Nathan, Marcus said it carefully, I believe you, but that's not going to matter if… I know, Nathan said. The campaign deck was still open on his screen. He looked at it without seeing it. Is she in today? He asked. Came in at 7:30. She had the board breakfast. Marcus paused. She looked fine. You know how she looks when she's in work mode. Nathan knew. He knew because he had now seen both versions, the work mode version and the kitchen at midnight version. And the distance between them was significant, and knowing that changed how you saw things in a way that couldn't be undone. Okay, Nathan said. Okay? Marcus raised an eyebrow. I heard you. I appreciate you telling me. He picked up his pen. I have to finish this deck. Marcus studied him for a moment. You know what you're doing? He asked. Nathan thought about Saturday night. He thought about a text in a cold park. He thought about a drawer. No, he said honestly, but I'll figure it out. He didn't see Ariana until the afternoon. She was coming out of the executive elevator when he was crossing the main floor toward the conference room where his team was setting up for a 3 o'clock. She was with 2 people from legal, deep in conversation, holding a folder of documents she appeared to be reading while walking, which Nathan had watched her do before and never entirely understood. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. The legal team kept talking. She kept moving. But for the space of 2 or 3 seconds, crossing that main floor with 20 feet between them, something passed between them that had nothing to do with the people around them or the documents in her hands or the meetings waiting at both ends of the room. She gave him a small nod. He nodded back. And then the moment was over, and she was back in her conversation, and he was walking to his meeting, and the office continued around them like nothing had happened, because, officially, nothing had. He sat through his 3 o'clock and contributed what he needed to contribute and did not think about the nod or the text or the Saturday night. He did not think about the look on her face when she described sitting across from that man at dinner, trying to be charming while being condescended to, performing ease she didn't feel. He thought about it a little. He was professional about it. After the meeting, he walked to his car in the parking garage and sat for a moment before starting the engine. He had to pick up Emma at 5:15. He had a chicken in the fridge that needed to be used tonight or thrown out. He had a permission slip for a field trip to the Science Museum that he still needed to sign in return. His life was a specific, particular thing. It had been built carefully around the needs of a small person who depended on it completely. That was not a burden. He never let himself call it a burden. But it was a reality, a serious one, the kind that didn't leave a lot of room for risk. He sat in the car and thought about risk. He thought about Ariana's voice in his kitchen, steady and honest, saying, I'm tired of being impressive. He thought about Emma on the swing, her sneakers pointing at the sky, entirely certain he was watching. He started the car and drove to get his daughter. But he had put Emma to bed by 8:30, which was victory enough for a Monday. He was back on the couch with the campaign deck when his phone lit up. Not a text this time. A call. The same number. He looked at his phone for 1 ring. 2. He picked up. Hi, she said. Hi. A pause that was not quite uncomfortable. I heard there's talk, Ariana said. Straight to it, no preamble. He'd noticed she didn't waste time with preamble when something actually mattered. Marcus told me this morning. I'm sorry, this is my fault. It takes 2 people to cause gossip, Nathan said. You didn't do anything wrong. I parked outside your house for 20 minutes at 11:30 at night, in a car everyone in that building knows. A pause. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, but I understand why. Another pause, slightly longer. Nathan, her voice was quieter now, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me directly because I am done with conversations where people talk around the thing. Okay. Saturday night, what I told you about why I came. She stopped. Does that change things? Between us? The couch was quiet. The house was quiet. Upstairs, Emma was asleep. He thought about what it was safe to say. He thought about his career, his daughter, the careful architecture of the life he had built. He thought about all of it, the way you account for all of it. And then he thought about the drawer. It changes something, he said. Yeah, he heard her breathe. That scares me, she said. Me too. She stopped, collected herself. There are about 15 reasons this is a bad idea. I've been running through them since Saturday. And? He leaned back on the couch and looked at the ceiling. And I don't have a clean answer for you, he said. I'd be lying if I said I did. I have a daughter to protect and a career I built from nothing, and a pretty strong preference for not blowing either of those up. He paused. But I also have a fairly clear memory of who showed up at my door on Saturday night and why. And I keep coming back to the part where you said I'm the only person who talks to you like you're just a person. Nathan, because you are, he said. You're a person. A very complicated, very capable, very exhausted one, but a person. And I can't pretend I don't see that. The line was quiet for a moment. This is going to be messy, Ariana said. I know. People are going to say things. They already are. It could cost you professionally. That's real. I won't pretend it isn't. I know that too. He moved his laptop off his lap, set it on the table. Can I ask you something? Yes. What do you want? Not what makes sense. Not what protects both of us. What do you actually want? The question sat in the line between them. I want to not go back to that penthouse tonight and feel like I imagined Saturday, she said finally. I want it to have been real. Nathan looked at his daughter's soccer cleat, still in the middle of the hallway floor. It was real, he said. A long, slow exhale on the other end. Okay, she said, soft, like a door opening. Okay. They talked for another hour, and this time the conversation was different. Not the emergency confession of Saturday night, but something more deliberate, more careful, two people starting to understand what they were actually doing. It was harder, in some ways. Easier in others. By the time they hung up, it was after 10 and Nathan sat in the quiet of his living room and didn't reach for the laptop. He thought about a knock on a door in the dark. He thought about what it costs to open it. He thought about Emma asleep upstairs, her mother's eyes, her stubborn streak, her absolute faith that when she looked for him, he would be there. He wasn't going to blow up his life. He wasn't going to be reckless with the thing that mattered most. But he was also, for the first time in 4 years, genuinely unsure what came next. And the feeling was not entirely bad. He put the soccer cleat by the front door next to the backpack, where Emma would definitely trip over it in the morning. He went to bed. He did not fall asleep right away, but eventually he did. The week that followed was ordinary in almost every way, and that was the strangest part. Nathan went to work. He ran his team through the campaign deck, got the revisions approved, started the production cycle on 2 separate client accounts that needed attention before the end of the quarter. He picked Emma up from school. He made dinner. He signed the field trip permission slip, twice, because Emma lost the first one somewhere between her backpack and her room, which was a distance of roughly 14 feet. He watched 11 minutes of a movie on Thursday night and woke up to the credits, right on schedule. Everything looked the same. Everything felt tilted about 3 degrees off center. He saw Ariana twice at the office, once in a hallway briefly, and once across the length of a company-wide meeting where she presented quarterly results to the full staff. She was in complete work mode both times, precise and composed, and impossible to read. She acknowledged him the way she acknowledged everyone else in those contexts. Professionally, without warmth, without the specific kind of attention that would give anyone anything to work with. He understood why. He respected it even. It was the right move. It still felt strange. Knowing what he knew and watching her perform the version of herself that didn't include Saturday night. They texted. Not frequently, she was busy in ways that were genuinely hard to describe, running a 300-person company while apparently also taking calls from investors and board members at hours that made him question whether she slept at all. But enough. Small things mostly. She asked how the campaign revisions went. He asked about a meeting he'd heard had run 3 hours over. She sent him on Wednesday evening a photo of a room service tray in what appeared to be a hotel in Dallas, with the message, "They gave me decaf. I didn't know until the 3rd cup." He typed back, "That's a war crime." Her response, "I've filed the appropriate paperwork." It was nothing. It was small and easy and possibly meaningless. He was aware of that. He also found himself checking his phone with a regularity he wasn't entirely comfortable with, which told him something he was trying not to examine too closely. Marcus noticed, because Marcus noticed things. "You're in a good mood," Marcus said on Friday morning, helping himself to Nathan's stapler without asking, which was his usual approach to office supplies. "I'm in a normal mood," Nathan said. "You hummed in the elevator." "I don't hum." "You hummed 3 bars of something unidentifiable and then stopped when you noticed I was there." Marcus set down the stapler. "I've worked 3 desks from you for 2 years. You have never hummed." Nathan looked at his screen. "Maybe I'm a hummer now. People change." Marcus gave him a long, evaluating look that Nathan refused to meet. "The talk," Marcus said carefully, "has mostly settled. For now. People moved on to something about the Parsons account being mishandled, which seems to have captured the office's attention." "Good. For now," Marcus repeated with emphasis. "I heard you the first time. I just want to make sure we're both clear on—" "Marcus," Nathan looked up. "I appreciate it. I mean that. But I'm handling it." Marcus looked at him for one more moment, then nodded and pushed back from the desk. "Okay," he said. "Cool, just be careful, man." "I'm always careful," Nathan said. He was almost convinced it was true. The first time Ariana met Emma was not planned. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks after the Saturday night, and it happened because Nathan's after-school pickup arrangement fell through at 2:30 when his usual backup, a woman named Diane who lived 2 streets over and had a daughter in Emma's class, called to say her car had broken down on I-25 and she was still waiting for the tow truck. Nathan was in a building-wide creative review. He could not leave. He texted the school to let them know Emma would be in aftercare, handled the logistics in 4 minutes flat, and then spent the rest of the meeting running the mental math on pickup timing while simultaneously trying to contribute meaningfully to a discussion about brand voice guidelines. What he had not anticipated was that Ariana would be in the building lobby at 4:45 when he came through it at speed, jacket half on, trying to get to his car. She was there for a completely separate reason, meeting a potential investor who had apparently decided the lobby was a fine place to have an introductory conversation, which Nathan gathered from the suited man she was in the middle of talking to and the careful, professional patience on her face that indicated she found this marginally irritating but was being gracious about it. She saw Nathan moving fast across the lobby and clocked his expression in about 2 seconds. "Is everything okay?" she said, which meant she had interrupted the investor mid-sentence, which, based on his expression, he was not expecting. "School pickup," Nathan said. "My backup fell through. I'm fine. I just need to go," she said. "Go, And then she paused, and something shifted in her face. "Do you need—" "I'm fine," he said again. "Sorry, He was already moving. He made it to the parking garage in 4 minutes, the school in 11, and the aftercare room at 4:57, which was technically within the window. Emma was the last kid there, sitting on a low bench by the door with her backpack in her lap, and the particular expression of a child who had been waiting longer than she preferred. "You're almost late," Emma said. "I'm 3 minutes early." "I thought you were going to be late." "I wasn't, though." Emma regarded him with the steady patience of someone deciding whether to let this go. She let it go. "Mrs. Kim let me draw," she said, holding up a piece of paper that appeared to depict a horse, though Nathan did not say this because Emma had informed him previously that it was a dragon, and he had learned from that exchange. "That's great, Bug. Can we get hot chocolate? It's almost dinner." "1 hot chocolate." "You have homework." "I did it in aftercare." He looked at her. She looked back at him with absolute conviction. He had learned early that the conviction was not always an indicator of whether the homework was actually done, but he also had learned that arguing in the parking lot never resolved anything efficiently. "1 hot chocolate," he said. "Small." Emma's face broke into a grin that was, as always, completely disproportionate to the victory she had achieved, and she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the car. They went to the coffee shop 2 blocks from the school that Emma liked because it had a couch near the window where you could watch the street. He ordered her small hot chocolate and a coffee for himself and found them a table while she arranged herself on the couch and claimed the window seat with the confidence of someone who understood territory. He was checking his phone. The campaign approval he'd been waiting on had finally come through, when the door opened and Ariana Sterling walked in. He looked up. She saw him immediately. She stopped just inside the doorway and for a second looked like she was considering backing out, which she clearly decided against because she walked over instead. "Hi," she said. "I was passing and I saw your car. I wasn't—" She stopped. "I can go." "You don't have to go," Nathan said. Emma had turned from the window with the swift attention of a child who has detected a new element in the environment. She looked at Ariana with open, uncomplicated curiosity. "Hi," Emma said. Ariana looked at Emma. Something in her expression shifted. Not softened exactly, more like it rearranged itself into something less guarded. "Hi," Ariana said. "I'm Emma." "I'm Ariana." Emma studied her for a moment with the frank appraisal that 8-year-olds deploy without understanding how disarming it is. "Do you work with my dad?" Emma asked. Ariana glanced at Nathan. He gave her nothing. He was curious, honestly, how she was going to handle this. "Yes," Ariana said. "I do." "He hums in the elevator," Emma said. "He thinks no one notices." Nathan looked at the ceiling. "I've heard that," Ariana said. Her voice had a warmth in it that he hadn't heard in a work context before. Unguarded, slightly surprised, like Emma had caught her off guard in a way she found unexpectedly pleasant. Emma appeared to find this answer satisfactory and turned back to the window. Nathan pulled out the chair across from him. Ariana sat down. "She's extraordinary," Ariana said quietly. "I'm aware," Nathan said. "She looks like you around the eyes. Everyone says she looks like her mother." "She does," Ariana said, "but she has your way of looking at people, like she's already figured out something you haven't told her." Nathan looked at Emma on the couch, her hot chocolate in both hands, watching the street with total absorption. "She does do that," he said. They sat there for 20 minutes, the three of them in the coffee shop, Emma periodically reporting on things she observed through the window with the seriousness of a correspondent filing dispatches. Ariana asking follow-up questions that Emma answered with complete seriousness in return. Nathan mostly watched. There was something about it that he didn't want to interrupt, something that felt tentative and real and a little frightening in the way that real things often are. When it was time to go, Emma climbed down from the couch and picked up her backpack and said, with complete gravity, "It was nice to meet you, Ariana." "It was nice to meet you, Emma." Emma nodded, satisfied, and went to the door. Nathan stood. "Thank you," he said quietly. He wasn't entirely sure what he was thanking her for. She seemed to understand anyway. "She checked up on me," Ariana said, also quietly, the corner of her mouth lifting. "At the beginning, when you were looking at your phone, she looked right at me to see if I was okay." "She does that." Nathan looked at his daughter, who was standing by the door studying the community board on the wall. "She's been doing it since she was 5. Looking after people. She learned it from somewhere." He didn't answer that. He picked up his jacket. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. "Yeah," Ariana said. "Tomorrow." He walked to the door. Emma grabbed his hand and pulled him out into the cold, and when he glanced back through the window, Ariana was still sitting at the table with her coffee cup in both hands, looking out at the street with an expression he couldn't read from this distance. He turned away and walked with his daughter to the car. The campaign that Nathan's team launched in late November performed better than anyone had projected, which was gratifying and slightly annoying in the way that being right usually is when you've had to fight for something. The data analyst produced a chart on Thursday morning that required no explanation. The numbers simply said what they said, and what they said was that the approach Nathan had pushed for over the objections of 2 senior people who outranked him had been correct. He did not make a thing of it. He thanked his team, forwarded the data to the relevant stakeholders, and went back to the next problem. What he didn't expect was the message that came from Ariana's office at 2 in the afternoon. Not from Ariana directly, but from her executive assistant, requesting that Nathan join a leadership strategy meeting the following week. It was a meeting he had never been included in before. It was specifically a meeting that sat one level above his current position. Marcus appeared at his desk within 30 minutes of the calendar invite landing. "You saw it," Nathan said. "The whole floor saw it." Marcus sat down. "Leadership strategy. That's Carver's group, Bradford's group. That's not your usual room." "I know. People are going to say things. People are going to say things regardless," Nathan said. "This is going to look like, I know what it's going to look like." Nathan set down his pen. "And I know what it actually is, which is that the campaign I ran just outperformed projections by 30%, and it makes sense for the company to start including me in those conversations." He met Marcus's eyes. "Both things can be true." Marcus chewed this over. "They can," he said. "But people aren't going to sit still for both things being true. They're going to pick one." "Then let them pick," Nathan said. "The numbers are the numbers. I can't control what story people decide to tell about them." It came out more certain than he felt. The truth was more complicated. He had thought about this, had been thinking about it, honestly, since the first week, since Marcus's first warning on Monday morning. He knew exactly how the meeting invitation would read to people who were already looking for a narrative. He knew that perception mattered in ways that were sometimes more powerful than reality. He had built his career carefully, without shortcuts, and the possibility of having that questioned, of having people look at his work and see not the work but a reason behind the work, was something that tightened in his chest in a way he didn't like. He called Ariana that evening. She picked up on the second ring. He could hear she was still in work mode, not quite, but nearly. The focused quiet of someone who had been in a long day and wasn't fully out of it. "The meeting invite," he said without preamble. A brief pause. "I figured you'd call. I need to know if it's—" He stopped, found the cleaner version of the question. "Is it because of the campaign numbers, or is it something else?" "It's because of the campaign numbers," she said. Flat and immediate, no equivocation. "You outperformed everyone in the building on a quarter where we needed it. The leadership group needs people who can do that. It has nothing to do with—" She stopped. "Nathan, you know I wouldn't do that." "I know." He did know. That was the honest answer. "But other people don't know that. Other people can review the campaign data and reach their own conclusions." Her voice had that edge in it, not directed at him, but present. The edge she got when she was trying to stay level-headed about something that was actually making her angry. "I have spent 6 years in this company making decisions based on merit. I'm not about to start defending those decisions to people whose opinions are based on gossip." "I understand that," Nathan said, "but I'm the one sitting at the desk when Marcus tells me the whole floor is watching." A pause. Longer than the others. "I know," she said. "I know you are. And I'm sorry that you have to navigate that because of what's happening between us." She said the last 4 words carefully, like she was acknowledging something they hadn't directly named before. "But I cannot run this company by letting whispers determine who gets into which meeting. The moment I start doing that, I've already lost." Nathan sat back. "You're right," he said. "I usually am," she said. Then, a beat later, a fraction drier. "The data supports this." He laughed, which he hadn't expected to do. "Come to the meeting," she said. "Do what you do. Let the work speak for itself. And if it doesn't work that way, then we deal with that when it happens." A pause. Together, he sat with the word for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay." The work mode edge softened slightly. "How is Emma's homework situation?" "She did it in aftercare, allegedly." "Allegedly?" "Verified tonight. It was done. She's irritatingly thorough when she decides to be." "She's going to be terrifying when she's 20, Ariana said. "I'm already a little scared of her at 8. He heard what might have been a smile in the silence. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night." He hung up and sat in the quiet of the living room and thought about the word together and what it meant when someone used it like that. Not casually, not as filler, but with intention. He thought about what she had said, what's happening between us, naming it without defining it, acknowledging it without trying to contain it. He thought about how long it had been since someone had said together and meant him, specifically. Not him and Emma. That was a together he understood, one he had built from necessity into something real. But him, by himself. Nathan Reed, as a person who existed outside of the role of father and provider, and the steady, careful man he had become out of necessity. It had been a long time. He turned off the lights and went upstairs. The leadership meeting was on a Thursday. Nathan prepared for it the way he prepared for anything that mattered. Thoroughly, without pretending it wasn't important, with the low-grade adrenaline that had always been his signal that he was taking something seriously. He was in the room early. 8 people total, including Bradford, who ran the East Coast accounts and had been at the company 11 years, and Carver, who oversaw partnerships and had the specific quality of someone who had never once in his life let anything show on his face. Nathan knew both of them by sight and reputation. Neither of them knew him particularly well. They did now know his campaign numbers. He had to assume that. Ariana came in last, 2 minutes before the scheduled start, with her assistant behind her and a tablet in her hand. She sat at the head of the table. She did not look at Nathan differently than she looked at anyone else. She opened the meeting, ran through the agenda, and moved with the efficient precision of someone who had been running rooms like this for 6 years and still found it necessary to actually be the sharpest person in the room. Nathan paid attention. He spoke twice, once to answer a direct question about the campaign methodology, once to raise a point about the fourth quarter data projections that he had noticed didn't account for a variable Bradford's team appeared to have missed. He kept it direct. He kept it useful. He did not overreach, did not perform, did not try to be impressive for the sake of it. He said what he knew and didn't dress it up. Bradford caught the projection point. He looked at the relevant slide, looked at Nathan, looked back at the slide. "Run me through that again," Bradford said. Nathan ran him through it. There was a silence while Bradford absorbed it. "Huh," Bradford said, which was, Nathan understood, a meaningful response from Bradford. Ariana said nothing. She made a note. After the meeting, Carver stopped Nathan in the hallway. "Good catch on the projections," Carver said. "Thank you." Carver looked at him for a moment, the evaluating look of someone who was deciding something. Then he nodded, once, and walked away. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't a resolution. It was one meeting, one moment, and the building still had its opinions, and the whispers hadn't gone quiet entirely, and nothing about the situation was simple or clean. But Nathan walked back to his desk with the particular quiet confidence of a man who knows he has done the work and done it well, and that, for today and this moment, was something he could stand on. His phone buzzed when he sat down. A text from Ariana's number. Carver doesn't say, "good catch," to people he doesn't respect. FYI. He typed back, "Noted. Also, you were right." Her response came fast. "I'm going to need you to say that again." He smiled at his phone. He put it face down on his desk and got back to work. The thing about building something new while simultaneously trying to protect everything you already have is that it demands a kind of constant awareness that is exhausting in ways that don't show up on the outside. Nathan handled it the way he handled most things, by being methodical, by not getting ahead of himself, by taking the next step, and then the step after that, without trying to see the whole staircase at once. Ariana handled it differently. She had always been a person who saw the staircase, who mapped 12 moves ahead while the people around her were still figuring out move 2. It was one of the things that made her exceptional at running a company. It was also, as Nathan was beginning to understand, one of the things that made the personal terrain harder for her to navigate. Because with people, with real people, who had their own complicated inner lives and needs and unpredictabilities, you could not map 12 moves ahead. You could not control the outcome by seeing it early enough. She was learning that, or trying to. He could see it in the way she sometimes stopped in the middle of a sentence, like she'd caught herself about to do the strategic thing when what was actually called for was the honest thing. They had dinner for the first time in late November. Not a date, not officially, nothing with a label on it. She came to his house on a Wednesday when Emma was at a sleepover at a friend's house, and he made pasta because it was the one thing he made well enough to make for someone who had undoubtedly eaten in restaurants that had Michelin stars and wouldn't flinch about it. She brought wine and didn't comment on his kitchen, which she'd already seen at its worst, and they ate at the same table where she had confessed everything 3 weeks earlier. "This is good," she said about the pasta. "You sound surprised." "I'm not surprised." She took another bite. "I just didn't know you could cook." I can cook 4 things. This is the best of the 4. He refilled her glass. "The other 3 are survivable." She laughed. The easy kind. The kind that had taken 3 weeks to arrive but felt, now that it was here, like something that had always been possible. "Tell me something about yourself," she said. "Something I wouldn't know from work." He thought about it. "I coached Emma's soccer team last spring," he said. "I know nothing about soccer." "How'd that go?" "We lost every game. But the kids seemed to have a good time, so I'm counting it as a partial success." He ate. "You?" "I took piano lessons until I was 12, she said. "Quit because I hated performing. The irony of that has followed me my entire career." "Can you still play?" "A little. Badly." She turned the wine glass by the stem. "I sit down at the piano in the penthouse sometimes when I can't sleep. Just scales. It's like, I don't know. It's the one thing where being bad at it doesn't actually bother me." He looked at her. "That's the most relaxed thing you've ever told me about yourself," he said. She looked up. "What do you mean?" "Everything else you've told me about what you do it all means something. It all has stakes attached to it. Piano at 2 in the morning because you can't sleep and you're bad at it, but you don't care." He shrugged. "That's just you, not the CEO, just you." Ariana looked at him with the expression he'd seen a few times now. The one that appeared when he said something that reached past the armor before she had a chance to redirect it. "Yeah," she said, quiet. "I guess it is." They stayed at the table until 11, long after the pasta was finished and the wine was gone, and the conversation had moved through a dozen different territories. Her childhood in Phoenix, his decision to move to Denver after his wife's diagnosis, Emma's dragon drawings, the investor she'd met that week who had reminded her uncomfortably of the man from the blind date, the particular loneliness of success that no one warned you about because it seems ungrateful to mention. When she left, she stood on the same porch where she had first appeared, and for a moment neither of them moved. "This was—" She stopped. "Yeah," he said. "I don't know what we're doing, Nathan." "I don't either." She looked at him directly, the way she'd looked at him in the kitchen 3 weeks ago. "Does that bother you?" she asked. He considered the honest answer. "Not as much as it probably should," he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite relief, but something adjacent to it, like a weight she had been holding, waiting to see where to set it down. "Good night," she said. "Drive safe." She walked to her car, different from the one Marcus had identified, smaller, less recognizable, and he stood on the porch until she pulled out and the taillights disappeared around the corner. The cold settled around him, familiar and quiet, and he stood there for another minute before going inside. He locked the door. He stood in the kitchen and looked at the 2 wine glasses in the sink and the table where they'd sat and the faint evidence that the evening had happened, that it was real. Then he washed the glasses, turned off the lights, and went to bed. He was asleep before 11:30, which was practically a record. December arrived the way it always does in Denver, fast and without negotiation, the temperature dropping 20 degrees in a single afternoon and the mountains turning white overnight like someone had thrown a switch. The city adjusted, the way cities do, and people pulled out their heavy coats and complained about the cold while secretly being relieved that the season had finally committed to something. Nathan had always liked December. Emma loved it with a totality that was hard not to catch. The lights, the music playing in every store, the annual argument about whether they could get a bigger tree this year, which they had every year and which Nathan always lost. This December felt different, not worse, just fuller, like there was more happening inside the usual rhythms, more weight to the ordinary days. He and Ariana had settled into something that didn't have a clean name yet. They talked most evenings, not always for long, sometimes just 20 minutes, while he cleaned up after dinner, and she was in a car between one obligation and another. They had dinner twice more at his house, and once, carefully, at a restaurant on the west side of the city that neither of them was likely to encounter colleagues at on a Tuesday night. He was aware, in the back of everything, that the office situation had not resolved so much as quieted, and that quiet was not the same as gone. He was aware of it. He was trying not to let it run the show. The thing that changed everything happened on a Thursday morning, 10 days into December, when Nathan arrived at the office to find an email waiting for him that had been sent at 11:40 the previous night. The sender was a name he didn't recognize, D. Weller. The subject line was blank. He almost filtered it as spam. Something made him open it. Mr. Reed, I work in compliance. I'm sending this from a personal account because I don't trust the internal system right now. There's something you need to know. The campaign numbers from November. Someone is working to reattribute them. There's a narrative being built that the results came from a legacy strategy that predates your involvement, not from your work. I don't know who's driving it or how far up it goes. I thought you should know before it becomes official. I won't respond to this address again. Nathan read it twice, then a third time. He looked at the timestamp. 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday. Someone sitting at home, on a personal device, deciding to send this. That was not a casual thing. That was someone who had weighed something and decided the weight came down on the side of telling him. He forwarded nothing. He showed the email to no one. He sat at his desk for 10 minutes with his coffee going cold and thought through what he knew and what he didn't know and what the possible shapes of this were. Then he picked up his phone and called Ariana. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was already in the office. I need 10 minutes, he said. Not email. In person. A pause. He heard her recalibrating something on her end. My office, she said. Now. Well, he had been in her office before, but only in groups, the kind of meeting where you sit at the long table and the chair at the head of it happens to be hers. He had never been in it like this. The door closed, just the two of them, her behind the desk and him in the chair across from it. She read the email on his phone without touching it, which he noticed, like she understood the instinct not to put her fingerprints on it, even digitally. When she looked up, her face was composed. Too composed, which meant something specific. You know about this, Nathan said. I know there's been some noise about the November campaign, she said. I didn't know it had gotten to this level. She handed his phone back. Who is D. Weller? I don't know. I haven't been able to find anyone by that name in the directory. Could be a pseudonym. Could be someone who left recently. She stood up and moved to the window. The floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over downtown Denver, gray and cold and very far below. This is more organized than I thought. How long have you been watching it? She turned. The look on her face was the one she wore when she was deciding how much to say. Ariana. 3 weeks, she said. There have been conversations happening in the East Coast Accounts Division, Bradford's group adjacent to it. The narrative has been building that your inclusion in the leadership meetings was preferential, that it wasn't based on merit. Nathan felt something flatten in his chest. Not surprise. Something more like the feeling of a thing you feared being confirmed. You've known for 3 weeks, he said. I've been monitoring it. You didn't tell me. I was handling it. You were... He stopped. Found the level version. You were handling it without telling me that my professional reputation was being actively dismantled in my own building. She turned from the window. I didn't want to escalate it before I understood what it was. That wasn't your call to make alone. The room was quiet for a moment. You're right, she said. Flat and immediate, the same way she'd been right about the meeting. I should have told you. I handled it the way I handle company problems, and you're not... This isn't only a company problem. No, he said. It's my career. I know. If this narrative lands, if people in that building start officially believing that my work over the last 2 years happened because of your feelings about me, I don't recover from that. You understand that. That's not something I explain my way out of. I understand. Her voice was controlled. He could see the effort of it. Nathan, I understand. Then tell me what's happening, all of it. Not the version where you've already decided what I need to know. She looked at him across the desk. Her desk. In her office. In the building she owned. He was aware of the geometry of it. He stayed in the chair and held her gaze. There's a board member, she said finally. Raymond Holt. He's been on the board for 4 years. He's been a problem for me for most of that time. Not openly, not in ways I could confront directly, But there's been an ongoing effort to position someone else for the CEO role when my contract comes up for renewal in 18 months. She paused. Someone Holt can work with more easily. Someone who will make certain decisions about the company's direction that I won't make. And this, the campaign, the narrative about us, that's him? I think it's connected to him. I can't prove it yet. She sat back down. If he can establish that my judgment is compromised, personally, professionally, it weakens my position with the rest of the board considerably. It gives him ammunition for the renewal conversation. Nathan sat with this. So I'm not just dealing with office gossip, he said. No, I'm a piece in a board-level political play. You're a target because you matter to me, she said. The directness of it landed hard. And people like Holt are very good at finding targets. Nathan looked at the desk between them. He thought about 3 years of work, the campaigns, the late nights, the meetings where he had been the person in the room with the right answer and had found ways to deliver it without making enemies. He thought about the careful, painstaking thing he had built. He thought about Emma's face. What are you going to do? He said. I'm going to find out exactly how far this has gone and who's involved, Ariana said. And then I'm going to remove every legitimate grievance they have, starting with your reporting structure. He looked up. I'm moving you to the independent leadership division, she said. Your promotions, your evaluations, your entire professional trajectory. None of it will pass through me or anyone connected to me. It'll be handled by the executive committee, independently, on numbers alone. She held his gaze. It will be unambiguous. There will be no argument anyone can make. That protects you, Nathan said slowly. But it protects you, she said. That's what I'm trying to do. I know. He did know. But it's also, we'll see each other less, professionally. There's less, I know, she said quietly. I know that. The office was very still. Somewhere outside the glass, Denver continued its morning, indifferent. I don't want to be the reason your career gets taken from you, Ariana said. I will not be that. Whatever else this is or isn't, I will not let that happen. Nathan looked at her. This woman who had built an empire and was sitting in the middle of it, trying to protect something she hadn't even named out loud yet, doing it in the most efficient and costly way she knew how. You should have told me 3 weeks ago, he said. Yes. Don't do that again. I won't. He nodded. He stood up. He picked up his phone from the desk. The person who sent that email, he said. Whoever they are. They took a risk sending it. I know. Make sure it was worth it for them. He left without waiting for an answer, because he knew she would. That was one of the things he had learned about Ariana Sterling. When she said she was going to handle something, she handled it, completely, and usually without anyone seeing the full extent of what she'd done until it was already done. It was one of her best qualities, and occasionally one of her most frustrating ones. He went back to his desk. Marcus was already at his, pretending to read something, and the pretending was extremely unconvincing. Don't, Nathan said. I didn't say anything, Marcus said. Keep it that way. Marcus wisely kept it that way. Tmet. The restructuring was announced internally on a Friday, framed as part of a broader reorganization of the creative leadership division, which was partly true because Ariana was too careful to do something this visible without giving it genuine structural cover. 3 people changed reporting lines. Nathan was one of them. His new direct oversight came from the executive committee, specifically from a woman named Helen Park, who had been with the company for 7 years and had the reputation of someone who read spreadsheets the way other people read novels, with complete absorption and total recall. Helen called Nathan the following Monday morning. I've looked at your portfolio, she said without preamble. The November campaign, the 2 before it, your work on the Hartley account. I want to understand your methodology. They talked for 45 minutes. She asked sharp questions and didn't accept vague answers, which Nathan respected. At the end, she said, I'll need a full brief on the Q1 strategy by the 22nd. I'll have it to you by the 20th, Nathan said. A brief pause. Good, she said, and hung up. He sat back in his chair and exhaled. Marcus appeared, inevitably. Helen Park, Marcus said. That's serious. That's the point, Nathan said. Marcus considered this. Smart, he said after a moment. I know. She's going to run you hard. Good. Nathan pulled up the Q1 framework he'd been roughing out for 2 weeks. I've got something to show her. The next 2 weeks were the hardest work stretch Nathan had had in a year. Not because the work itself was beyond him, but because he was doing it with the awareness that it was being watched in a way that work usually isn't. Every decision he made, every direction he took the campaign strategy, would be seen by Helen Park, who had no interest in anything but what the numbers said and what the thinking behind them was. There was no room for anything but the work. He found to his own surprise that he didn't resent it. There was something clarifying about it, a kind of relief in having the terms be this simple. Do the work. Let it speak. Let it be the only thing that matters in this particular room. He stayed late 3 nights that week. On the second night, at 9:15, his phone lit up. Still there? From Ariana. He typed back, Q1 brief. You, board prep. Holt asked for a supplemental financial review at the last minute. Timing is interesting. How are you? A pause, longer than usual. Tired. You? Same. He looked at his screen, at the half-finished brief, at the Denver dark outside the window. Emma made me a card today, drew us both on it. Me and her, just the two of you? He looked at the card, which was sitting at the corner of his desk because he'd found it in his jacket pocket at lunch and hadn't been able to put it back. Yeah, just the two of us. A pause. Then, she left space on the right side of the drawing. I don't know if that means anything. He sent it before he fully thought about it. He wasn't sure what he expected. Her response came after a minute. It means she's 8 and she left space. Don't read too much into it. Then 30 seconds later, or read everything into it. I don't know. I'm not good at this part. Nobody is, he typed. Go home, Ariana. You first. I have 40 pages of brief to finish. I have Holt's entire supplemental review to undermine with actual data. A pause. We're both impossible. Yeah, he sent back. Good night. Good night, Nathan. He put down his phone and went back to the brief. He delivered it on the 20th, as promised. Helen read it in full before their meeting, which he knew because she came in with margin notes, actual handwritten notes in a legal pad she carried everywhere, and went through it section by section for an hour and 15 minutes. She pushed back twice, hard, on projections he had been confident about. He defended them with the data, and she re-examined the data and reached her own conclusions, which aligned with his on one point and diverged on another. The divergence point, she said, you're accounting for seasonality adjustment, but your baseline assumes a consistency in the consumer behavior data that I'm not sure holds through Q1. Walk me through your reasoning. He walked her through it. She listened. She made a note. I'll accept the projection with the caveat that we build in a review checkpoint at 6 weeks, she said. If the behavior data shifts, we adjust. Agreed, Nathan said. She looked at him over her reading glasses. You argue well, she said. You don't argue when you're wrong, which is rarer than it should be. He took this as the compliment it appeared to be. I'll have comments on sections 3 and 7 to you by end of day, she said. Address them and we'll call this approved. Thank you, Helen. She gave him a brief nod that indicated the meeting was over, and he left. In the hallway outside, he stopped and stood for a moment. The brief was going to be approved. The work was going to stand on its own. It was one meeting, one document, but it was the clearest possible evidence that the thing Holt's people were trying to construct, the narrative that Nathan Reed's professional standing was a product of anything other than what he'd actually done, was not going to be easy to build when the work itself kept getting in the way. He pulled out his phone. He started to text Ariana. He stopped. He put his phone back in his pocket and walked to the elevator. Some things you let settle before you say them out loud. The confrontation, when it came, did not look like a confrontation. That was the thing Nathan hadn't anticipated, that it would arrive quietly, in a hallway, from a man he had spoken to perhaps 4 times in his career, wearing a pleasant expression that had nothing pleasant behind it. Raymond Holt was 62, trim, with the kind of permanent ease that came from spending decades in rooms where he held the most leverage. He stopped Nathan on the 4th floor on a Wednesday afternoon in mid-December. as if they were simply two people who had both ended up in the same hallway at the same time. "Reed," he said. "Good. I've been meaning to speak with you." Nathan slowed. He didn't stop completely, which he registered as instinct, something in him unwilling to let this man choose the terms of the conversation entirely. "Mr. Holt," he said, "I hear Helen Park has been impressed with your Q1 work." Holt said it pleasantly, sincerely, even. That was what made it interesting. "That's good. She's rigorous. Approval from Helen means something." "It does," Nathan said. "You've had a good run this year." Holt tilted his head slightly. "Started the year in one position, ending it considerably higher. That's movement. It's been a productive year." "It has." Holt paused like he was considering something generously. "I want to be direct with you, Reed, because I think you're a smart man and you deserve directness." He held Nathan's eyes. "The company is going through a period of transition. The next 18 months are going to require steady leadership, the kind of leadership that's above any perception issues. Do you understand what I mean by that?" Nathan looked at him. "I think I understand exactly what you mean," he said. "Good." Holt's expression remained pleasant. "Because the decisions we make personally, the relationships we form, the lines we may or may not blur, they have consequences. Not always immediately, but eventually." He let that sit for a moment. "A man with your talent has a real future here. It would be a shame for that future to be complicated by circumstances that were ultimately avoidable." The hallway was quiet. Someone walked past at the far end. Nathan had thought about this conversation. Not this one specifically, but a version of it. The moment when the threat, which had been implicit and circulating in whispers, took a shape he could actually see. He had thought about what he would say. He had thought about the careful, professional response that would not give anyone ammunition. "I appreciate the directness," Nathan said. "Let me be direct back." He kept his voice even. "My work is documented, reviewed by an independent executive committee, and producing results that are in the public record of this company's performance. If someone has a concern about my professional conduct, I'm confident that process is the right place to surface it." He paused. "Anything else is noise." Holt looked at him for a moment. Something in his expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a slight recalibration, like he had expected a different response. "Of course," Holt said. Still pleasant. "Of course it is." He nodded. "Have a good afternoon, Reed." He walked away. Nathan watched him go and stood in the hallway for a moment and breathed. His hands were steady. He hadn't expected that. He had expected to be shaking, at least a little. He was not shaking. He walked to the stairwell, not the elevator, the stairs, and went down 2 floors and came out near the small secondary kitchen that nobody used in the afternoon, and he stood there and thought about what had just happened and whether he had made it better or worse, and whether there was, at this point, any meaningful difference between the two. He thought about Emma's drawing, the space on the right side. He pulled out his phone. He called Ariana. She answered in one ring. "Holt just spoke to me," Nathan said, "in the hallway. He wasn't specific about anything. He was very pleasant about everything." A silence on her end that told him this was not entirely surprising to her. "Where are you?" she said. "Third floor kitchen. The empty one." "Stay there." She was there in 4 minutes, which meant she had come down the stairs, not the elevator. She came in and closed the door and looked at him. Not the CEO look, not the board meeting look, just Ariana, tight with something she was working to contain. "Tell me exactly what he said," she said. He told her. All of it, word for word, as close as he could reconstruct it. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He's escalating," she said. "He was checking whether you'd be rattled, whether you'd come to me or try to handle it yourself, or what?" She looked at him directly. "Or whether you'd walk away. From the job. From everything." Nathan looked at her. In the cold fluorescent light of the empty kitchen, with the sound of the building around them and the distance they'd carefully maintained for weeks suddenly gone, he saw her face clearly. The tension in it, the effort she was spending to keep her expression from showing what she was actually afraid of. "Is that what you're worried about?" he asked. That I'll walk? It would be the rational choice, she said, for a man trying to protect his career and his daughter and his... all of it. If this gets worse, the rational choice is to exit cleanly before it costs you more than it already has. Ariana, I'm being honest with you. I know. He looked at her. I'm not going to walk. Something moved in her face. You don't know yet how bad it could get, she said. No, he said. But I know that I went home last Tuesday and Emma showed me the drawing she made and told me that the dragon she drew was guarding the house and that dragons pick who they protect and they don't change their minds. He let that sit for a moment. She's 8. She got that from somewhere. He held Ariana's gaze. I don't change my mind about people either. Once I'm in, I'm in. The kitchen was very quiet. Ariana looked at him for a long moment. He watched her try to find the strategic response, the careful one, the one that kept everything at a manageable distance. And then he watched her stop trying. This is going to get harder before it gets easier, she said. I know. Holt isn't going to stop. I know that too. Nathan, Ariana. He said it the way she sometimes said his name, like he was being careful with it. What do you want? She had asked him that once before, indirectly, and he had asked it back to her, and she had been honest with him then. She was honest with him now. I want this to work, she said. All of it. I want the company, and I want the board, and I want... She stopped. I want to not have to choose. Then don't choose, he said. Fight for all of it. She looked at him. We fight for all of it, she said slowly, like she was testing the weight of the word. Yeah, he said. We. She breathed in. The tension in her face didn't disappear. There was too much reality pressing on it for that. But something underneath it settled. Like something that had been braced against impact stopped bracing just slightly. Okay, she said. He nodded. The board meeting is January 8th, she said. Holt will have his supplemental review ready by then. I'll have mine. She stood up straighter. I need to go make some calls. Go. She moved toward the door, stopped. Nathan. She turned back. What you said to him in the hallway about the noise. Yeah. That was exactly right. She went. He stood in the empty kitchen for another minute, then followed her out, in the opposite direction, back toward his desk, and the Q1 brief, and the ordinary mechanics of a day that had stopped being ordinary somewhere around Wednesday and hadn't found its way back. He sat down. He opened his laptop. He had work to do. The week between Christmas and New Year's had a specific quality that Nathan had always found hard to name. Not quite real, not quite a holiday, a strange suspended interval where the city moved slower and the office ran on skeleton staff, and the year felt like it was holding its breath before committing to being over. He had taken the week off, or most of it, the way he did every year, not because he didn't have work to do, but because Emma's school was closed and she needed somewhere to be, and that somewhere was with him. They drove up to Breckenridge for 2 nights, just the two of them, in a small rented cabin that smelled like pine and old wood and the particular mustiness of a place that got used hard in ski season and not much otherwise. Emma didn't ski. Nathan had tried to teach her 2 winters ago, and the lesson had ended with Emma sitting in the snow delivering a calm, reasoned argument for why the whole enterprise was structurally flawed. But she liked the mountains and the cold and the way the snow looked at night under the outdoor lights. She liked hot chocolate with an unreasonable number of marshmallows and card games and staying up 30 minutes past her bedtime because vacation rules were categorically different from regular rules, a position she had stated formally and Nathan had conceded. He needed those 2 days more than he had realized. The board meeting was 8 days away. Ariana had spent the days before Christmas preparing, which meant Nathan had seen less of her than usual, and their conversations had been shorter, focused, purposeful, the personal pieces set carefully to one side while she worked. He understood it. He did the same thing when a campaign was in its critical phase, that narrowing of attention that didn't leave room for much else. He understood it, and it was still strange, that particular kind of absence from someone who was technically always reachable. On the second night in Breckenridge, after Emma was asleep, he sat on the small covered porch with a blanket and a beer and his phone and the mountains dark and enormous on every side. And he thought about January 8th the way you think about something you can't change, turning it over, examining its edges, putting it back down. His phone buzzed. Still awake? Ariana. Porch. Mountains. Very cold. He typed back, "How are you?" A longer pause than usual. "I found it," she sent. The full chain. Holt, 2 members of the East Coast accounts team, and a board contact I hadn't identified yet. They've been coordinating since September. Nathan sat forward in his chair. "Since September," he typed. "That's before you were included in the leadership meetings, yes. It predates us. The campaign success accelerated the timeline, but the play against my renewal was already in motion." A pause. "This was never actually about you." He sat with that for a moment. "Does that change anything?" he asked. "It changes the evidence I can present on the 8th. Another pause. "It doesn't change what they've done to your reputation in that building." "I'm sorry for that, Nathan. That part I can't undo." He looked at the mountains. The beer was going cold in his hand. "What happens if the board meeting goes badly?" he typed. The response took a while. "If Holt has enough votes, they can call for a confidence review of my leadership. It's not a removal. My contract gives me more protection than that, but it creates a formal cloud, makes the renewal in 18 months significantly harder." A pause. "Best case, I walk in there with enough documentation that he can't make his case cleanly. Best case, 2 or 3 of the board members he's counting on see the coordination and decide they don't want to be associated with it. And worst case is a long fight, months, possibly the full 18 months. She typed something, deleted it, typed again. "I've been in long fights before. I'm not afraid of them. I know you're not." "Are you?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "No," he typed, "but I'm a little afraid of watching you go through one." Another long pause. "That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me in months," she sent back, which probably says something unflattering about my social life. "Get some sleep, Ariana. You first. I'm in the mountains. I'm contractually required to stay up and appreciate them." He could almost hear her laugh. "Good night, Nathan. Good night." He sat on the porch for another hour, until the cold finally made the blanket insufficient and he went inside. Emma had migrated, as she always did, from her side of the bed to approximately the center, and he moved her gently without waking her and lay in the dark and listened to the wind off the mountain and did not think about January 8th. He thought about it a little. Eventually, he slept. The new year arrived on schedule, with the usual noise and the usual quiet aftermath. And then it was the 8th, and Nathan drove to work in the dark of a 7 a.m. that felt colder than the thermometer justified. He was not in the board meeting. He had no reason to be and no standing to be there, and Ariana had not suggested it, and he had not asked. He went to his desk, and he worked. The Q1 brief had been approved by Helen Park the week prior, and he was now 3 weeks into the actual execution phase, coordinating with his team on deliverables that were already showing early traction. The work was concrete and demanding and gave his hands something to do while his mind tracked a room he wasn't in. Marcus sat at his desk all morning and said nothing about any of it, which was the greatest act of restraint Nathan had ever witnessed from him. The meeting had been scheduled for 2 hours. By 11:15, it had been running for 3.5. Nathan got coffee. He revised a copy deck. He replied to 11 emails. He reviewed a data pull from the analyst and flagged 2 inconsistencies that needed to be addressed before the weekly report went to Helen. He did all of this and checked his phone approximately once every 6 minutes, which he was aware of and could not stop doing. At 11:47, his phone lit up. A text from Ariana. "Call me." 2 words. He couldn't read anything into 2 words. He went to the stairwell, the same stairwell he had been using for private calls since December, which had become a kind of unofficial office for conversations that needed to not be overheard, and called her back. She answered immediately. "Tell me," he said. "We're in recess." Her voice was flat in a way that could have meant 100 things. 40 minutes. They're reviewing the documentation. The documentation held? Every piece of it. Something shifted in her voice. "Nathan, the chain I found, 2 of the board members Holt was counting on saw it, and they didn't know. They genuinely did not know the full scope of what he'd been doing. One of them asked for the recess herself." He pressed his back against the stairwell wall. "That's good," he said. It's not over. He's not going to concede cleanly. He'll find a way to reframe it, reposition, make it about governance concerns rather than the personal campaign." She paused. "But I have the room in a way I didn't have it at 9 this morning." "You prepared for this for a month." "I prepared for this for 3 years," she said, and he heard the weight in it, the long, grinding, unglamorous work of being the person in the room that certain people wanted gone and refusing, consistently, stubbornly, to give them the opening they needed. "I have to go back in 20 minutes. She stopped. "I wanted to hear your voice." He stood in the stairwell with the phone pressed to his ear and the faint sound of the building around him, and he thought about this woman who had shown up at his door in the dark and confessed something she had carried alone for too long, and who was now in a boardroom fighting for something she had built from nothing, and who had paused a board meeting recess to call him. "You've got this," he said. Simply. Not a pep talk, not a performance, just what he actually believed. A breath on the other end. "Okay," she said. "Go back in." "Yeah." A pause. "Nathan." "Yeah." "After this is over." She stopped. "I'm tired of being careful about everything. I'm tired of..." Another stop. "I want to take Emma somewhere. All 3 of us. Somewhere that isn't a kitchen or a coffee shop or a building we both work in. Somewhere we're just people." He was quiet for a moment. "When this is over," he said, "we will." "Promise?" He thought about Emma's drawing, the space on the right side. "Yeah," he said, "I promise." She hung up. He stood in the stairwell for another 30 seconds, then went back to his desk. The board meeting ended at 1:17 in the afternoon. He learned the outcome not from Ariana. She was in follow-up conversations for the next 2 hours, the kind of careful individual work that happens after a major decision when you need to make sure the result actually holds. But from Marcus, who had a source somewhere in the administrative structure of the building that Nathan had never identified and stopped trying to. Holt's supplemental review was tabled, Marcus said, appearing at Nathan's desk at 2:30 with the air of someone delivering significant information at a measured pace. "No confidence motion. The renewal timeline for Sterling's contract is proceeding without a formal review period." Nathan looked at his screen. "She won," Marcus said. "She made her case," Nathan said. "The board made a decision." Marcus looked at him. "You're being very careful about the language," Marcus said. "I'm being accurate about the language." "Nathan." Marcus sat down. "Come on." Nathan looked at him. Marcus looked back, and his expression had dropped the careful neutrality he usually maintained around this subject. He just looked like a person who had been watching his friend go through something hard and was relieved that it had come out the right way. "Yeah," Nathan said. "She won." Marcus exhaled. "Okay. Good." He stood back up. "Bradford, by the way, has been walking around since the meeting ended looking like someone who made a calculation error. I don't know what that means specifically, but it seems relevant." It means the November campaign numbers mean something different to him now than they did this morning. Marcus absorbed this. So the narrative falls apart when the person building it loses credibility with the board. Nathan turned back to his screen. The work was always the work. Now there's nothing left to use to argue otherwise. Marcus stood there for a moment. "You handled this well," he said. "All of it. I know I pushed back a lot early on. You were looking out for me." "I was. I still am." He paused. He seemed to be selecting a word carefully. "She's serious about it. About you. I can see that now." "Yeah," Nathan said. "She is." Marcus nodded. He picked up the stapler again, out of what appeared to be pure habit, realized he didn't need it, put it back. "Good," he said, and went back to his desk. Nathan sat for a moment. Then he pulled up his laptop and went back to the Q1 execution plan and worked steadily through the afternoon. At 4:50, a text from Ariana. "Done. I'm going home. Real home, not the office." Novel concept. He smiled at his phone. He typed, "Go. Eat something. Sleep." "Is that an order? From your employee?" No, from someone who's been watching you run on coffee and adrenaline for a month? Yes. A pause. Then, I'll eat something. Can't promise the rest. Another pause. Thank you, Nathan, for all of it. He looked at the text for a moment. Go home, he sent back. He heard from her once more that evening, a photo sent at 8:30 of a plate of pasta that appeared to have been ordered from somewhere, with the message, eating something. You win. He sent back a photo of Emma's dinner, which was chicken nuggets arranged into a face, because Emma had declared it a nugget face night, non-negotiable. Ariana's response? She's running that household, and you both know it. Completely, he sent back. Good night. Good night. Baton. January moved the way January does, slowly at first, gray and deliberate, and then suddenly it was the end of the month, and Nathan was looking at Q1 numbers that were tracking above projection, and Helen Park was sending him emails that contained the word strong, which from Helen was the approximate equivalent of anyone else sending a confetti explosion. The office had settled. Not perfectly. Offices never settle perfectly. There is always some ambient friction, some leftover tension seeking a new shape. But the specific charge that had surrounded Nathan's name and Ariana's name in the same sentence had lost most of its voltage. Holt was still on the board, which was an ongoing reality that Ariana was managing with the careful, consistent documentation of someone who understood that a threat neutralized once is not a threat eliminated. But the immediate pressure had lifted, and the day-to-day of the building returned to its usual texture. Nathan noticed something else. The people who had watched the November campaign perform, who had then watched the board meeting outcome, who had then watched Nathan's Q1 work land with Helen Park the way it had, they were recalibrating. Not dramatically. People don't recalibrate dramatically. They do it in small, quiet adjustments. Bradford stopped looking past Nathan in meetings and started actually engaging with his contributions. A senior copywriter named Liz, who had been pointedly cool since December, asked him to look over a pitch she was developing and took his feedback without the defensive edge she'd had before. Small things, the kind that accumulate. The promise he had made in the stairwell, somewhere that isn't a kitchen or a coffee shop, he kept on the last Saturday of January. He had told Emma the night before that they were going somewhere with a friend of his from work. Emma had asked if it was a woman, and he had said yes, and Emma had looked at him with the patient, calibrating expression of someone processing new information. Is it Ariana? Emma asked. He hadn't told her the name. He was fairly sure he hadn't told her the name. How do you say her name when you're on the phone, Emma said. When you think I'm asleep. He looked at his daughter. Yes, he said. It's Ariana. Emma nodded slowly, in the manner of someone who had suspected this and was now confirmed. Is she your girlfriend? Emma asked. He stopped. We're figuring that out. Emma considered this answer with visible seriousness. That means yes, but you're nervous about it, she said. He looked at the ceiling. Get ready for bed, Em. I'm just saying, Emma said, climbing under her covers with complete composure. I liked her. At the coffee shop, she asked me real questions, not the fake questions adults ask. What fake questions do adults ask? Like, what's your favorite subject in school? Emma said it in a tone of devastating mimicry. Nobody actually cares about that. They just don't know what else to say to kids. And what did Ariana ask you? Emma thought about it. She asked me what I thought the dragon on my drawing was protecting. I said the house, but also the people who didn't have houses yet. She said that was a good answer. Emma settled back on her pillow. She meant it. I could tell. Nathan stood in the doorway of his daughter's room. Good night, Bug, he said. Good night, Dad. A pause. You can invite her to more things. I don't mind. He turned off the light. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he went downstairs and sat on the couch and looked at the living room, the cactus magnet on the fridge, the permission slips on the counter, the soccer cleat that had been replaced by a different soccer cleat in the same general location, and thought about what his daughter had just told him, with the matter-of-fact clarity of a child who had not yet learned to make things more complicated than they were. He picked up his phone and called Ariana. Hi, she said. Saturday, he said. There's a nature center outside the city, Emma likes it in winter. They have this thing with the raptors. Birds of prey, they do a presentation. She's been asking to go since November. He paused. Come with us. A silence. Nathan, it's not a test, he said. It's not a statement. It's just, come. The three of us. Like people. He heard her breathe. What time? She said. 10 o'clock. I'll drive. I can drive. Ariana, I'll drive. Fine, she said. A pause. Should I bring anything? Emma will require hot chocolate at some point during the outing. That's non-negotiable, and you should know going in. I can manage that expectation. And she's going to ask you approximately 40 questions about the raptors, most of which will be unanswerable. Also manageable. She might ask you personal questions, he said. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's just, Nathan. Her voice was warm in a way that reached him cleanly. I want to be there. I know what I'm saying yes to. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay. He heard a smile in it. 10 o'clock Saturday. I'll text you the address. Do that. A pause. Nathan, I'm glad the board stuff is... Me too. I didn't say thank you properly. You thanked me. I sent a picture of pasta. That was a meaningful gesture, he said. She laughed. That real one, the loose and unguarded one, the one that changed whatever room it was in, even when the room was just the inside of a phone call. Good night, she said. Night. Batit. Saturday came cold and clear. The kind of January day that had given up on clouds entirely and delivered instead a sky so blue it looked like a correction. Nathan picked Ariana up at 9:45 from a coffee shop 2 blocks from her building, at her suggestion. She had thought about logistics, which he appreciated. Emma was in the back seat. She said hi to Ariana when she got in the car, and then immediately asked, Do you know what a peregrine falcon's dive speed is? I do not, Ariana said. 240 miles per hour, Emma said. It's the fastest animal on Earth. I didn't know that. Most people don't. Emma appeared satisfied. It's faster than a race car. That seems implausible. It's not, though, Emma said. I can show you the data. Ariana turned in her seat to look at Emma. Nathan glanced in the rearview mirror and watched his daughter produce a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket, actual notes she had apparently taken before this outing, and hand it forward with complete seriousness. Ariana unfolded the paper and read it. This is thorough, she said. I wanted to be prepared, Emma said. I can see that. Ariana refolded the paper carefully and handed it back. What else did you research? What followed was 23 minutes of Emma explaining raptor biology and hunting behavior and the evolutionary history of birds of prey in North America, while Ariana asked follow-up questions that were specific enough to confirm she was actually listening, which Emma clocked and responded to by escalating the detail level of her explanations. Nathan drove. He said almost nothing. He did not need to. The Nature Center was busier than he expected for January, but the raptor presentation was in an outdoor amphitheater with good sight lines, and they found seats near the front. Emma sat between them. When the handler brought out the first bird, a red-tailed hawk, massive and unruffled, standing on the gloved fist like it owned the situation, Emma grabbed Nathan's arm with one hand and Ariana's arm with the other, completely unconsciously, purely from the excitement of it, and she held on to both of them while the hawk spread its wings and the crowd made the collective noise that crowds make when something wild and enormous is suddenly very close. Nathan felt Emma's grip on his arm and looked sideways at Ariana and found her already looking at him. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The hot chocolate came after, from a small stand near the parking lot, and Emma negotiated the marshmallow situation directly with Ariana, who turned out to have a position on marshmallow quantity that aligned almost exactly with Emma's, which Emma described as extremely sensible. They walked back to the car slowly in the cold afternoon sun, Emma between them now running a few steps ahead and then circling back to report additional raptor facts she had remembered, and Nathan and Ariana walked at the same pace, and their arms were close enough that their sleeves touched occasionally, and neither of them moved away. When they dropped Ariana back at the coffee shop, Emma said goodbye with the directness she reserved for people she had decided about. "You can come again," Emma said. "To stuff." Ariana looked at her. Then she looked at Nathan, and the look had something in it that he wasn't going to try to name in a parking lot with Emma watching. "I'd like that," Ariana said. Emma nodded. Confirmed. She got back in the car and immediately located her Raptor notes to review what she felt had been underemphasized during the presentation. Ariana stood on the sidewalk. Nathan was still in the driver's seat, door open. "Thank you," she said, "for today." Emma picked the place. Emma picked the place, Ariana repeated. "But you picked up the phone." He looked at her in the cold, clear January light. "Yeah," he said, "I did." She smiled. Not the professional one, not the careful one. Just a smile, quick and real and unguarded. And then she turned and walked toward the coffee shop, and he watched her go for a moment before pulling the door shut. "Dad?" Emma said from the back seat. "Yeah, Bug." "I like her," Emma said, firmly, as if this settled something. "I know," Nathan said. "Just so you know that I know," Emma said, "in case it was helpful." He pulled out of the parking lot and drove his daughter home through the blue winter afternoon and did not try to figure out exactly what he was feeling because some things, he had learned, go better if you let them be what they are instead of naming them before they're ready. He knew what they were. He was pretty sure she did too. That was, for now, enough. February arrived without ceremony, the way most things that matter tend to arrive. Not with a signal or a clear marker, but simply as the next day after the day before, indistinguishable until you look back later and realize that something had already shifted without announcing itself. Nathan noticed it first in small ways. Ariana had started texting Emma directly, not Nathan, Emma, after Nathan made the mistake of mentioning that Emma had asked whether peregrine falcons were endangered and hadn't been satisfied with his answer. Ariana had looked it up, found a 2-paragraph summary she thought Emma could use, and asked Nathan for Emma's tablet contact. He had given it to her without entirely thinking through the implications. Within 48 hours, Emma and Ariana were conducting an independent correspondence about raptors that Nathan was only partially included in, and which had expanded without anyone's conscious decision to also cover topics including the migratory patterns of monarch butterflies, the structural engineering of beaver dams, and whether a platypus was technically unfair to other animals. "She sends really good links," Emma told him one evening, scrolling through her tablet with the absorbed focus she usually reserved for her own research. "I'm glad," Nathan said. "She found a video of a golden eagle hunting a mountain goat." Emma looked up. "It was intense. Was it appropriate?" "It was nature," Emma said, with the philosophical calm of an 8-year-old who had decided this settled the matter. He texted Ariana that evening, "You've created a raptor correspondent." Her response? "She asked me yesterday whether I thought dolphins were overrated. I'm still thinking about my answer. What's your position?" Genuinely undecided. They're very confident for an animal that lives in water. He laughed at his phone, which Emma observed from across the room with the expression of someone cataloging evidence. The professional landscape continued to settle. Helen Park's Q1 review in late February produced numbers that Nathan didn't have to defend. They were simply there, clean and unambiguous, the kind of results that make follow-up questions feel redundant. Bradford, in a moment that Nathan suspected cost him something, stopped by his desk one Thursday morning and said, without preamble, "The Hartley campaign, the approach you used on consumer behavior segmentation. I want to understand it better. Would you be willing to walk my team through it?" Nathan said yes. He spent 90 minutes with Bradford's team the following week, and when he was done, Bradford shook his hand and said, "Good." Just that. But Bradford shook very few hands, as far as Nathan had observed, so the gesture carried weight. He told Ariana about it that evening. "Bradford asked for your methodology," she said, out loud in front of his team. "Yes." "Nathan." Her voice had something in it he'd come to recognize. A kind of precise satisfaction, restrained but real. "Do you understand what that is?" "It's a handshake," he said. "It's Bradford telling his entire East Coast accounts team, in the clearest language he knows how to use, that the narrative about you was wrong." She paused. "That's not nothing. That's actually significant." "I know," he said, It's just, he thought about how to say it. I'm aware that the campaign did what it did regardless of whether anyone acknowledged it. I don't need Bradford to validate the work. No, she agreed, but the people in that room needed to see him do it. That matters for what comes next. He didn't ask what came next. He had learned to trust that Ariana was usually several moves ahead and that she would tell him what he needed to know when he needed to know it. What came next, it turned out, was March. The first week of March brought a late-season storm that dropped 8 inches on Denver overnight and canceled Emma's school for a day, which Emma greeted with the pure, uncomplicated joy of a child who understands a snow day as an unqualified gift. Nathan worked from home, or tried to. Emma's snow day and his work from home had significant scheduling conflicts that she navigated by appearing at his desk approximately every 20 minutes with either a question, an observation, or a drawing she felt he should see immediately. By 10 in the morning, he had given up on the campaign timeline he'd been trying to complete and was instead building a snow fort in the backyard with his daughter, because the fort apparently required his specific engineering expertise, a claim he suspected was not entirely accurate, but which he was willing to accept. Ariana called at 10:45. "Snow day?" she said, hearing the background noise. "Structural engineering consultation," he said. "Emma's vision, my labor." "That's parenting," Ariana said. "Do you have time to talk? I have something to tell you." He straightened up and looked at Emma, who was packing snow with the focused intensity of someone who had a very clear structural vision and was seeing it realized. "Em, I need 5 minutes." Emma didn't look up. 7. 5. 6.5. 5, he said. He walked to the back corner of the yard, out of range. "Okay. What happened?" "Holt resigned from the board," Ariana said. "Effective end of month." Nathan stood in the snow. "When?" "He sent the letter to the board chair last night. I found out this morning." A pause. "He cited personal reasons." He did not cite personal reasons. What he cited, in language that required a lawyer to make sense of, was that he felt the board had moved in a direction inconsistent with his vision for the company's leadership. "Meaning he lost," Nathan said. "Meaning he looked at the documentation I had compiled and at the board members who had shifted after the January meeting and at 18 months of contract renewal math, and he decided that the fight wasn't winnable." Another pause, and in it something he hadn't heard from her often, the sound of someone genuinely exhaling after holding something for a very long time. "He's gone, Nathan." Nathan looked at the back of his house. The porch light was on. Emma was methodically patting snow into a corner wall with her mittens, humming something quietly to herself. "How do you feel?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Tired," she said. "Relieved. Slightly angry that it took this long." A pause. "Mostly just done. I want to be done with it." "You are done with it." "I know." Another silence. "The renewal is essentially confirmed now. The board chair told me this morning it'll be a formality, 5-year extension." 5 years, he said. 5 years. He could hear the weight of it. Not triumphant, not performed, just the actual weight of 5 years of work arriving at a place it had been trying to reach. "I built something real," she said quietly, "and no one gets to take it." "No," he said. "They don't." Emma had looked up from the fort and was watching him across the yard with that steady, calibrating gaze of hers. He raised a hand to let her know he saw her. She went back to her wall. "I want to celebrate," Ariana said. "Not a company dinner, not a board thing. Something real." A pause. "The 3 of us, maybe, if that's—" "Yes," he said, before she finished. A quiet moment on the line. "Okay," she said, softly. "Okay." He went back to the fort. Emma didn't ask who called. She handed him a ball of packed snow and pointed to where it needed to go, and he placed it where she indicated, and they worked until the cold made further engineering impractical, and then they went inside and Nathan made soup, and Emma sat at the kitchen table and drew a picture of a snow fort that she described as architecturally significant, and the day was ordinary and quiet and full. And Nathan carried the phone call in his chest like something that had settled into its right place after a long time of being slightly off-center. The celebration that Ariana had in mind turned out to be a weekend in late March, when the mountains were still white but the city had started its slow return to green. She had rented a cabin, a real one, not a ski lodge, a proper house with a kitchen and a fireplace and a porch that faced west into the mountains, about an hour outside Denver. She had asked Nathan if Emma would be comfortable with it, and Nathan had asked Emma, and Emma had said yes with the speed of someone who had been waiting to be asked. They drove up on a Friday evening, Nathan and Emma in his car following Ariana's smaller one along the mountain road as the light went orange and then pink and then faded into the deep blue of a clear mountain night. Emma fell asleep before they got there, which Nathan knew she would. He carried her inside. Ariana held the door open and then stepped back to give him room, and he settled Emma on the couch with her jacket still on and her boots carefully removed. And she didn't wake up. She slept the way she slept in winter, completely, unflinchingly, like sleep was a country she had moved to with full intention. Nathan stood in the cabin kitchen and Ariana made tea, actual tea, with a kettle she had apparently brought because the cabin's electric one was, in her assessment, inadequate. And they sat at the kitchen table while Emma slept in the next room and the mountain dark pressed against the windows, and the fire that Ariana had started before they arrived filled the room with a low, steady warmth. "Thank you," Ariana said, "for this, for making it possible." "You rented the cabin," he said. "You know what I mean." He did know. "You made it possible too," he said. "You stayed." She looked at her tea. "I almost didn't," she said. "The morning after I came to your house. I woke up in the penthouse and thought about how exposed I was, and I almost sent you a message saying it had been a mistake and I was sorry." "Why didn't you?" She looked up. "Because I thought about how you'd opened the door," she said. "You didn't look surprised. You didn't look strategic. You just opened the door and stepped back and let me in." She paused. "That was such a small thing. It was the most important thing." He looked at her across the small kitchen table in the mountain cabin with his daughter asleep in the next room and thought about the night she described. The cold, the porch light, the sound of the knock he hadn't expected. "I had a drawer," he said. She looked at him. "A mental drawer," he said, "for things I had put away, things I wasn't going to think about." He shrugged. "You've been in it since before I can pinpoint." "How long?" "Long enough that I stopped being able to tell you exactly when it started." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "I had convinced myself it was fine, that it was manageable, that the drawer was shut, and that was the end of it. And then I knocked on your door." "And then you knocked on the door," he said. "And I thought, okay, the drawer's open. Now what?" She smiled. "The quiet one, not for a room, just for him." "How's that working out?" she asked. "Complicated," he said. "Expensive, occasionally terrifying." He looked at her. "Best thing that happened to me since Emma." She was quiet for a moment. The fire shifted in the other room. He heard Emma turn over on the couch, the small sound of her resettling. "I have a question," Ariana said, "and I want you to answer it honestly, even if the honest answer is complicated." "Okay." "Emma." She said it carefully. "I don't want to be someone who appears in her life and then disappears. I've been aware of that from the coffee shop, from the nature center, from the texting about dolphins. She's not—" She stopped, found the honest version. "She's not a peripheral thing. She's the whole center of your life. And I don't know how to be part of something I'm not sure I understand yet." She met his eyes. "I'm not afraid of her. I'm afraid of doing it wrong, of being someone she trusted and then being gone." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "You're not going to disappear," he said. "You don't know that." "I know you," he said. "You don't do things halfway. You built a company from a 24-year-old's idea, and you have never done anything in your life halfway." He paused. "Emma figured that out at the coffee shop. That's why she asked you back. She asked you if she could." "Emma doesn't ask for things she doesn't mean," he said. "She asked because she wanted you there." He held Ariana's gaze. "And so did I." She breathed slowly. "I don't know how to be I don't know what I am," she said. "In this. To her. I don't have a word for it." You don't need one yet. Nathan, Ariana. He said it gently. She draws dragons that protect people who don't have a home yet. She's going to be fine. She's already decided about you. He paused. The question is whether you've decided about her. She looked at him. I decided about her at the coffee shop, she said, when she handed me her raptor notes. Something in Nathan's chest settled in a way it had been trying to settle for months. Then we're okay, he said. She looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded, once the way she nodded when something was decided and didn't need to be revisited. They sat at the table until midnight, talking the way they had learned to talk, without performing, without strategy, just two people who had stopped finding it necessary to hide the complicated parts of themselves from each other. She talked about her mother, who had called 3 times in the past month, sensing something had changed, asking careful circling questions that Ariana was still figuring out how to answer. He talked about the anniversary of his wife's death coming in April, the way it was different every year, sometimes harder, and sometimes just quiet, and Emma's habit of placing flowers on the photograph on the shelf without being asked. She does it herself? Ariana said. Every year, she picks whatever's blooming in the yard. Last year it was a weed, technically, but she said the color was right. He looked at his mug. I don't know where she got it from. I never asked her to. She got it from watching you, Ariana said simply. He looked up. She watches everything you do, Ariana said. You know that. I know. You're a good father, Nathan. She said it without embellishment, without the soft edges people usually put around compliments. Just a statement, true and direct, delivered the way she delivered things she meant completely. I want you to hear that from someone who isn't required to say it. He sat with it for a moment. Thank you, he said, quietly. She nodded. They went to sleep eventually. Separate rooms, Emma shifting from the couch to the small bedroom she had claimed on arrival. Nathan, on the pullout in the study, that was marginally less comfortable than he had hoped. He lay in the dark and listened to the mountain quiet, which was a different kind of quiet than the city quiet he was used to. Deeper, older, complete in a way that urban silence never quite achieved. He thought about a drawer that had been shut for years, now permanently open. He thought about the specific courage it takes to want something after you've learned how badly wanting things can hurt. He thought about Emma's flowers on the photograph, placed there without prompting, and how his daughter had learned that love isn't a door you close when something ends. It's a continuous practice, kept up even when it costs you something, especially then. He fell asleep thinking about that. Saturday morning at the cabin had a quality that Nathan did not try to analyze too carefully. Emma awake first, as always, finding the kitchen and then finding Ariana already there, and the two of them having apparently been in conversation for 20 minutes by the time Nathan appeared in the doorway in his sweatshirt, registering the scene with the slightly delayed comprehension of a man who had not yet had coffee. Emma was at the kitchen counter on a stool. Ariana was at the stove. There was something in a pan that smelled significantly better than Nathan's usual breakfast repertoire. She's making eggs, Emma informed him. With stuff in them. With stuff, Nathan said. Tomatoes and cheese, Ariana said, without turning around. There's coffee. He found the coffee. He found a mug. He stood in the kitchen doorway and drank coffee and watched Ariana navigate his daughter's running commentary about the optimal egg-to-cheese ratio with the focused attention she brought to things she was taking seriously, and Emma watched the pan with the concentration of someone monitoring an important experiment, and the morning light came through the mountain windows at an angle that made everything in the room look clean and unhurried. He didn't say anything. Sometimes the right response to a moment is to let it exist without commentary. After breakfast, Emma declared a hiking requirement, and they walked the trail behind the cabin for an hour, Emma ahead as she always was, narrating discoveries. A frozen creek, a bird she was fairly certain was a rough-legged hawk, though she acknowledged she couldn't confirm without her reference materials. A section of trail where the snow had melted, and the first pale green of early spring was already pushing up through the mud. Nathan and Ariana walked at the same pace, their shoulders occasionally touching, neither of them remarking on it. She talks about her mom sometimes, Ariana said quietly. In the texts, just mentions her, like she's part of the conversation. She's part of everything, Nathan said. That's how Emma keeps her. Ariana was quiet for a moment. Does that, is that complicated? For you? With me? He thought about it honestly, the way she'd asked him to answer things. Sometimes, he said. Not the way you might think. Not like, it's not about replacing anything. It's more like, he watched Emma crouch down to examine something in the mud at the edge of the trail. Kate was real. She was here, and she mattered, and Emma belongs to her in ways that are permanent. That doesn't stop. That's not a thing I need to move past. He paused. But I'm also 43 days away from being the age Kate was when she died, and I have been aware of that date for 6 months. And what I have figured out is that the only thing she would actually hate is if I used losing her as a reason to stop being alive. He looked at Ariana. She was not that kind of person. Ariana looked at him steadily. What kind of person was she? She asked. He smiled, which surprised him slightly. Impatient, he said. She had no patience for anything that wasn't real. She could tell in about 30 seconds if someone was performing something versus meaning it. She would have been terrible at corporate politics. A pause. She would have liked you, the real version, the 2 in the morning piano scales version. Ariana looked at the trail ahead. That's the nicest thing, she said. That might be the nicest thing anyone has said to me. I mean it. I know you do, she said. That's why. Emma had stood back up and was looking at them from 15 feet ahead with her hands on her hips. Are you two coming? She called. The hawk went that way. We should follow it. We're coming, Nathan called. Emma turned and walked on, completely satisfied, already scanning the tree line. Ariana looked at Nathan. She's running this hike, she said. She's been running this hike since the parking lot, he said. They walked on. The months that followed did not resolve in a straight line. Nothing real does. There were difficult weeks, a period in April when the board contract renewal process required Ariana to be in New York for 12 days, and the distance was harder than Nathan had expected, not in a dramatic way, but in the steady, cumulative way of someone who has gotten used to a presence and then notices its absence in 100 small moments. There was a week in May when Emma had a hard time. The anniversary of her mother's death, the flowers on the photograph, 2 nights of waking up from dreams she couldn't describe, but that left her quiet for days afterward. And Nathan sat with her through all of it and came out the other side exhausted in a bone-deep way that no amount of sleep entirely fixed. Ariana came over the Saturday after Emma's hard week. She didn't make a thing of it. She showed up with groceries and made dinner. A real dinner, the kind that took 2 hours and filled the kitchen with smell. And Emma sat at the table and helped chop things and talked, slowly, about her mother. And Ariana listened the way she listened to things that mattered, with her full attention and without the impulse to resolve or redirect. After Emma was in bed, Nathan sat at the table with the remnants of the dinner and looked at Ariana across the kitchen. You didn't have to do this, he said. I know, she said. She needed it, he said. Someone being here and making dinner and just being here. She needed that. I know she did. Ariana looked at him. I needed it too. A pause. I wanted to be the person who came. I'm tired of being the person who sends a text. He looked at her. You didn't have to earn that, he said. I know, she said. I wanted to. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held his, and they sat like that in the kitchen with the dinner dishes around them and the quiet house above them and the spring night outside the window. And Nathan thought about all the things that had led to this specific moment. The knock on the door, the cold porch, the kitchen table where it had started, Emma's drawing with the space on the right side. And he thought about how none of it had been simple, and how simple was probably not the right goal anyway. The right goal was real. Real was harder and better, and worth considerably more. I love you, he said. He hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way the true things tend to come out. Not on schedule, not with preparation, just as the most accurate available word for what was already there. Ariana looked at him. She looked at him for a moment that was long enough that he registered it, that he sat in the quiet of it without trying to fill it. I love you, she said. I've been trying to figure out when to say it for 2 months. Something in her face shifted. Not quite embarrassed, more like a person who has been holding something carefully and has now set it down. I kept waiting for the right moment. There's no right moment, he said. I know that now. He looked at their hands on the table. We're okay, he said. Not because he doubted it, just because sometimes you say the thing out loud. We're okay, she said. Outside, Denver was doing what Denver does in spring, unpredictable and full of itself. Warm days dropping into cold nights without notice, the mountains still white-capped against skies that couldn't decide between winter and something else. The city moved around them and the house was quiet and the kitchen table had accumulated, over the months, the particular lived-in quality of a surface that gets used every day. Permission slips, Emma's drawings, Nathan's campaign notes, a coffee ring that he kept meaning to address, a photograph that Emma had placed there one afternoon without explanation, a picture of the three of them at the nature center in January, slightly blurry because Emma had taken it herself. Slightly blurry. Real. What? By autumn, the life they had built together had the quality of something that had been going long enough to have its own rhythms. Ariana had a drawer in Nathan's bathroom. Emma had a standing question she texted Ariana every Sunday. Always about an animal, always specific. And Ariana answered everyone, sometimes with a paragraph, sometimes with a link, once with an audio clip of the actual sound a lyrebird makes that Emma replayed 11 times and described as the best thing she had ever heard. Ariana's mother came to visit in September. Nathan had heard about this visit in the weeks preceding it with the particular frequency that indicated Ariana was more nervous about it than she wanted to say. Her mother was 70, sharp, originally from Phoenix, and had spent the better part of Ariana's career watching her daughter succeed while quietly worrying about everything that success was costing her. Nathan met her on a Sunday afternoon at the house. Because Emma had been unwilling to have the meeting happen anywhere that wasn't her home turf, which Nathan had not argued with. Emma shook Ariana's mother's hand when they met. Ariana's mother, Maria, looked down at this small, serious-faced child and said, "You have very good posture." "Thank you," Emma said. "So do you." Maria looked at Nathan, then she looked at her daughter, then she looked back at Emma. "Do you have anything to drink in this house?" Maria asked. "We have lemonade," Emma said, "or coffee, but Dad says that's for adults." "Lemonade is fine," Maria said. Emma led her to the kitchen with the confidence of someone who owned the space, which she essentially did, and Nathan stood next to Ariana in the hallway. "Well," Ariana said quietly, "she'll be fine," he said. "I know Emma will be fine," Ariana said. "I'm worried about my mother." From the kitchen, they heard Emma explaining the correct way to open the cabinet where the glasses were kept, which apparently had a specific technique. Maria listened without interrupting. "She's going to be fine, too," Nathan said. He was right. Lunch lasted 3 hours. Maria asked Emma real questions, which Emma had noticed and commented on to Nathan later that evening in exact parallel to what she had said about Ariana months before. Maria had looked at Nathan across the table at some point during the meal with an expression that he had not been able to entirely read, but which he thought contained something like relief. The specific relief of a mother who has been worried about her daughter for a long time and is looking at the evidence that the worry has a different shape now. At the door, leaving, Maria held Ariana's face in both hands for a moment. She said something in Spanish that Nathan didn't catch. Ariana said something back. Maria looked at Nathan. "Take care of each other," she said. "Not to one of them. To both of them." "We are," Nathan said. Maria nodded. She squeezed Ariana's hand once, and then she left. Ariana stood in the doorway for a moment. Emma appeared beside her. "She's nice," Emma said. "She knows a lot about Arizona." "She grew up there," Ariana said. "She said I could visit sometime." Emma looked up at Ariana. "Can we?" Ariana looked down at Emma. Something in her face did the thing Nathan had started watching for. The softening that happened when Emma caught her off guard. The specific, unguarded quality that existed only when she had forgotten to be careful. "Yeah," Ariana said. "We can." Emma nodded, satisfied. She went back inside. Ariana stood in the doorway looking at the street where her mother's car had disappeared. Nathan stood beside her. "She approved," he said. "She cried in the car. I could tell from the way she said goodbye." Ariana's voice was steady, but not entirely. She's been waiting for me to have this, whatever this is. This is your life, he said. The one that actually fits. She looked at him. It took me a long time, she said. Most things worth having do. She leaned into him slightly, not dramatically, just the small adjustment of someone letting themselves rest against something solid. He put his arm around her and they stood in the open doorway and looked at the autumn street, the leaves that had turned overnight into the particular red and gold of a Colorado fall, and the air was cold and clean and entirely ordinary. There's a thing people say about love, that it saves you, that it arrives and rearranges everything, that it is the answer to whatever question you were asking. Nathan had believed versions of this once, in his early 20s, before life had shown him that love is not rescue. Love does not remove the hard days or the grief or the complicated math of raising a child alone or the professional battles or the Raymond Holtz of the world. Love does not make you less afraid. What it actually does, in the specific and unsentimental version that Nathan understood by the autumn of that year, is it gives you someone to be not afraid with, someone to sit in the kitchen with at midnight after the hard days and not have to explain yourself, someone whose presence makes the ordinary days feel chosen rather than just happened upon, someone who shows up and keeps showing up not because it's easy, but because they have decided that you are worth the showing up. He had been Emma's someone for 4 years. He had been, without quite realizing it, waiting to be someone else's. Ariana had spent a decade building something enormous and had done it, almost entirely, alone. She had been so good at alone that she had forgotten to notice it had become a problem. She had driven to a house on the outskirts of Denver on a November night and knocked on a door and said the true thing, the terrifying thing, and in doing so, she had given herself away back to a version of her life that had room in it. That knock had cost them both something. There had been no version of this that was free. The professional scrutiny, the board battle, the months of navigating a relationship in a building where both of them worked and people watched and words got passed around without context, none of it had been manageable in the way people use that word when they mean easy. It had been manageable in the real way, by managing it day by day, making it through the next week and the week after that. But nothing real is free. That is the most human truth Nathan knew. Everything worth having asks something of you, and the asking is not a flaw in the system. It is how you know what you actually value. You find out what you're willing to pay for. You find out what you'll walk through. Emma came to the door. "You're letting the cold in," she said. Nathan looked at her, then at Ariana. "She's right," Ariana said. "She usually is," Nathan said. He stepped back. Ariana came inside. Emma shut the door with the decisive click of someone who has restored the correct order of things. And then she went to the living room and picked up her tablet, and Nathan went to the kitchen to think about dinner, and Ariana sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop and worked on something for 20 minutes before looking up and asking Emma a question about the bird documentary she was watching. And Emma answered, and they went back and forth about it for a while, and the kitchen filled with the smell of whatever Nathan was making, and the light got low outside and the evening came on. Outside, the porch light came on automatically at dusk. Nathan noticed it from the kitchen window, the same light that had been on a November night 11 months ago when a woman had stood on his porch in the cold and knocked on his door and said the true thing. He stood at the window for a moment. 1 year. That was all it had been. And inside it, a board battle, a restructuring, a nature center in January, a cabin in the mountains, Emma's raptor notes, a mother's visit, 2 people saying I love you at a kitchen table covered in the honest mess of a life actually being lived. Not smooth, not perfect, real. He turned back to the stove. "Dinner in 20, he said. "Noted," Emma said without looking up. "Noted," Ariana said from behind her laptop, and the corner of her mouth lifted. Nathan cooked. The house was warm. The porch light held the dark at bay in its small and steady way, the way it had for the year before and would for the years ahead, and outside, Denver carried on, indifferent to what had happened inside one small house on its western edge, indifferent to the knock and the kitchen and the drawer opened and the space on the right side of the drawing finally, quietly filled.